Today, we're talking about a philosophy that's less about getting lost in abstract thought and more about rolling up your sleeves to get things done. We're diving into pragmatism, a powerful toolkit for tackling very real-world problems. So let me ask you this. When you're trying to solve a really complex issue, where do you put your trust? Is it in the cold, hard data, the numbers? Or is it in the rich, personal narratives, the human stories? This question, right here, is at the heart of a huge debate in social research. For a long time, it felt like researchers had to pick a team in this great divide. In one corner, you have post-positivism. This view says, hey, there's a single objective reality out there, and our job is to measure it with numbers to find general laws that can predict things. And in the other corner, you've got constructivism. This camp focuses on subjective meaning, the idea that our realities are shaped by our own unique perspectives, and it uses stories to understand the world from the inside out. But what happens when we get stuck in this either-or fight? Well, our ability to actually solve problems can get seriously limited. The world is messy, and our biggest challenges usually need both the what from the data and the why from the human experience. So what if there's a third way? And that's exactly where pragmatism comes in. It's not about picking a side at all. It's about building a bridge between them. It's a philosophy literally designed to break this deadlock. See, pragmatism flips the script. Its main question isn't what is true in some grand abstract sense. Instead, it asks a much more grounded question. What are the real-world consequences of believing this or doing that? It shifts the focus away from old philosophical arguments and puts it squarely on the problem itself, letting you use whatever tools will get the job done. It's all about finding what works. Now, this isn't some brand new idea. Pragmatism has deep American roots, kicking off back in the 1870s with thinkers like Charles Sanders Peirce and William James. But it was really the philosopher and social reformer John Dewey who took these ideas and ran with them, connecting them directly to the big challenges of his day: education, democracy, and social progress. Okay, so how does this what works approach actually, work? Let's open up the Pragmatist's Toolkit and take a look inside. To really get a feel for this, let's try a simple little thought experiment. Just look at this object on the screen. How would you define what it is? Well, this perfectly sums up that old debate we were talking about. The post-positivist, focused on objective reality, would just say, it's a table, simple, right? Case closed. But the constructivist would come along and say, whoa, not so fast. It really depends. It's a bench if I'm sitting on it, but it's a platform if I'm standing on it to change a light bulb. The pragmatist just cuts right through all that noise by asking a totally different question. They don't start with what the object is. They start with their goal. They ask, what is my purpose for this object? If their purpose is to eat dinner, it's a table. If their purpose is to rest, it's a bench. The definition flows directly from the intended outcome. And that, right there, is the pragmatic mindset in a nutshell. Now, this way of thinking actually builds into a really practical 5-step process that John Dewey laid out. It all starts when you encounter a real problem, something that's genuinely happening out in the world. Then you step back and define your goal. What are you actually trying to achieve here? From there, you brainstorm all the possible actions or solutions, and only then do you choose the best tools for the job, whether that's numbers, stories, or a mix of both. Finally, you act, you observe what happens, and you learn from it. It's a living, breathing cycle. This whole process of moving back and forth, thinking about your methods as you define your goal, and then refining your goal as you see what your methods turn up, it actually has a name. It's called abduction. It's this really creative kind of reasoning. You're not just going from a big theory down to a specific case, you're constantly in motion, moving between the data and your ideas to find the absolute best explanation you can. So where does a philosophy like this really shine? Well, one of the clearest examples you'll find is in the field of social work, a profession that is fundamentally built on action and improving people's lives. And the connection here is just incredibly strong. Social work's core idea of the person in environment perfectly mirrors Dewey's concepts. The whole profession is about action, about experience, and about finding what works for real people in their specific situations. You can even think of pioneers like Jane Addams, who is a colleague of Dewey's. Her work was all about enhancing human well-being through practical, community-based action. Pragmatism is basically the philosophical engine for that kind of mission. Think about it. A really rigid, numbers-only approach might tell you if a social program works on average. But pragmatism lets us go so much deeper. It gives practitioners and researchers the freedom to mix their methods so they can ask the really important questions, like why did it work? For whom did it work best? And under what specific circumstances? That's how you get to really useful, nuanced answers. And we can take this one step further. Because of its focus on real-world problems and democratic values, pragmatism isn't just a research approach. It's an incredibly powerful tool for pursuing social justice. John Dewey himself said it best back in 1938. He argued that if a research problem doesn't come from the actual lived social conditions people are facing, then it's basically artificial. It's fake. For a pragmatist, research has to start with the genuine struggles and problems that people are dealing with in their communities. And you can see how this becomes a huge advantage for social justice work. A pragmatic approach empowers communities to define their own problems and to say what success actually looks like for them. It combines hard evidence with powerful, personal stories to make a truly compelling case for change. It's an approach that is fundamentally aligned with democratic values, and it's all about creating knowledge that isn't just interesting, it's useful for taking action. Okay, so after all of that, what's the big takeaway here? What's the main thing to remember? I think the most important thing to get is that pragmatism is so much more than an academic theory. It's a mindset. It's an intellectual toolkit that frees you from having to join a rigid ideological camp and instead encourages you to be flexible, to focus on action, and to judge ideas based on one thing, their real-world results. So, in our world, which is just full of complicated, tangled problems, what new solutions might we find if we just shifted our focus a little bit? What could we solve if we stopped asking which side is right and started asking, simply and powerfully, what works?